I'm Dr. Mollie Marti, and welcome to Resiliency Matters. Today we are speaking with Dr. Brenda Eheart, a researcher and visionary, founder of the nonprofit Generations of Hope, a leading authority on intentional neighboring, and the author of a brand new book that we're going to be talking about today, Neighbors, the Power of the People Next Door. Welcome, Brenda.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
As are we. So let's lay some groundwork here. What is intentional neighboring?
Well, intentional neighboring is truly a way of life, and it really revolves around two commitments. One is a commitment by neighbors to intentionally be really good neighbors, to be there for their neighbors in good times and bad, to try to continually um, uh, make a community that is based on friendship and help and commitment. And the second commitment is that they are neighbors and embrace people who are vulnerable for whatever the reason, and especially try to address their social needs, especially to be really an integral part of the community, both taking and giving back.
Excellent.
So there's two key components.
And this book, you know how much I enjoyed it, and so it's dog-eared already, and I have some highlights. So you write, for too long we have ignored the value, importance, and power of the people next door, especially of those who are vulnerable and those who are older, to help make this world a better place, not only for those facing difficult challenges, but for all of us. We have underestimated, underutilized, and too often completely ignored the importance of the special gifts, talents, experiences, and capacity to care that ordinary people, through neighboring, possess in helping to address adversities that make us vulnerable. We have forgotten that what gives our life its deepest significance and meaning are not professional services, but the caring relationships we make with family, friends, and neighbors. So that was just one of the many quotes that I highlighted to kind of bring forth this concept of intentional neighboring, because it goes beyond, the can I borrow a cup of sugar kind of neighbor. It encompasses.
Absolutely.
So let's talk through the three foundational values. I think this might also help our viewers understand that you say this is what makes intentional neighboring work. The first, embracing the power of relationships. Talk a bit about that.
More and more is being written and being recognized about how important, critically important, relationships are to our well-being, both relationships that are not caring and supportive and how detrimental that can be, but also the opposite of how important they can be. Caring relationships can be to our well-being. And there's a lot being written about loneliness. I think this epidemic, pandemic, is really pointing that out to all of us in our personal lives, things that we took for granted. We can no longer, and we realize what a gap there is in our heart and in our being when we can't be with our families. When and it goes, there's many levels to this. There's neighbors as well. There's even, we sort of take for granted. I did people that I would meet in the grocery store once a week, and just realizing what a lift that gave me just to talk to them and just connect. And so this connecting is extremely, extremely important.
Yeah, we're designed for it, aren't we?
We are designed for it.
The second value, reframing the meaning of vulnerability. And I really enjoyed and appreciated how you talked about the importance of language, really strength-based language, as
Oh.
part of this reframing the meaning of vulnerability.
That again is something I think we have taken for granted, that we use language, and I'll use some examples in the child welfare field. We talk about, do we have enough beds for children do we have, we call them wards of the state. And in this intentional neighboring community of Hope Meadows that I was integrally involved in, there were families there who had children in their homes that they were planning to adopt, children from foster care. And if they'd been former foster parents, they would call them, "This is my foster son or daughter," instead of saying, "This is Johnny" or "This is Mary," like we would do if it were the children we had given birth to, for example. Um, or we would never say, "We have so many beds." We don't say that in terms of our own children. We say they have a home, they have a family, they live on a street, they live in a neighborhood. That sort of normal language we change when we talk about people who are vulnerable. It's the same thing for older people who are in nursing homes. We may call them our clients, and yet we say it's a home environment. Well, we don't talk about people who live in our homes as our clients. So I think we have to be very careful. And when we don't use the same language, we're sending a message that these people are different from us. And in fact, we all um, have the same needs. Some of them may be different, but we all have needs to be recognized, to be honored, to be valued. And a lot of the language we use, especially in our institutions that we have, um, do not send a message of value and real significance.
So not only is the language saying they're different, but it's often a less than, it inherently is what I'm hearing you say.
Absolutely less than, yeah. Yes.
And then the third value, engagement of older adults. And I don't know that many people would really have given this the thought. And you wrote, when talking about how the seniors were motivated by wanting to be there for the kids, they came with that motivation. You wrote, we had a vision of what this might look like, but no one, I believe, imagined how interdependent everyone would become, nor did we understand the importance of such reciprocal and mutually supportive, caring relationships involving all generations in addressing the ebb and flow of vulnerability. Everyone, including those of us who rarely thought of ourselves as vulnerable, found our lives enriched. And then the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, when they were reviewing this project, they said, as proximity and commitment combine to create love, all are hard pressed to determine which group, the children, parents, or seniors, benefits the most. So talk about that intergenerational.
That's really true. We created this neighborhood, this intergenerational neighborhood that had its focus. This was in the 90s. It had its focus on children who desperately needed adoptive homes. They were in the foster care system. They were not going to be able to be returned home, and they needed adoptive homes. So we had 13 families who took in children that from foster care with the idea that they would adopt them, and they eventually did. And then we had other housing that we rented to seniors. That's the name they wanted to be called. And they would get, for reduced housing costs, give us 6 hours a week of their time. And at first, we all thought, oh, here come these children with these very troubled pasts, and we really have to do all we can to help these children and focus on, their needs and the problem behaviors that they had. And we never really thought about anything beyond that. The seniors didn't, I didn't, that was our real focus. But it wasn't long before we realized how important the children were in our lives in terms of the seniors. It really gave them meaning and purpose. And it gave them things to do, and they could use their talents. We have 10,000 people age 65 in this country that retire every day. And by 2030, all the boomers are going to be age 65 or older. This is a gold mine of support and help to address the many challenges that vulnerable people have. And we know that our social systems, and again, the COVID-19 has really exposed this. So many of our social systems are breaking down, or just are not capable of meeting all the needs. And the idea of relationships also is often just not there in terms of social services. And yet, as we've talked about, it's so critically important. So here we have this wealth in terms of numbers, and then in terms of their talents, in terms of their wisdom, in terms of their desire to help, to be a part of this, forming these relationships, being there to listen, being there to validate these people who are vulnerable. And we really have to, I think, start considering that to strengthen our social safety net, as well as to foster well-being. And in professionals, and we need to, professionals, I'm hoping, will begin to recognize that they aren't experts on relationships. Quote, ordinary people, these neighbors are, and that's their expertise. Others may be experts on helping to feed the hungry, housing people, etc. But this is another whole area that's critically important, and we have the people to do it, and we have the need, huge need.
Yeah, I think that's the only part of your book I took issue with, is you define seniors as 55 or older, and that's me in a couple months. So I was like, yikes, that hurt, but I'm with you. So we are going to put up on the screen these 5 design patterns, and we're going to integrate them into our conversation moving forward. But your book also discusses, and I really want to invite people to jump into this book and this deeper conversation, that these 5 key pieces. Number 1, a key focus on vulnerability. 2, 3 or more generations of residents coming together. 3, embracing diversity. 4, using physical design to facilitate relationships. You talk about that in the context of building a community center and using the physical design. And 5, transformational leadership. And that's where we're going to pick up on that transformational leadership, because I really am interested in looking at what are those characteristics of people that come together to do this work. What we also are going to do when we regroup is using intentional neighboring to navigate the pandemic. So there's a lot of practical advice coming your way. Viewers, stay tuned.
Today, more than ever, you need fast, reliable internet. At Mediacom, we want you to know you can count on us. Our fiber-powered 100% gigabit technology network was built for the future. We have enormous capacity and power and 99.99% network reliability. So even though these are uncertain times, we're prepared. And you can be certain we'll keep your world connected.
As the nation's doctor, I often get asked, what should I do if I think I might have coronavirus?
People who are sick should stay home. You don't go to an emergency room, you don't go to a clinic. You get on the phone and you ask for advice and instructions from your physician.
We don't want you to go into the ER or the doctor's office without talking to them first, because you might spread coronavirus to someone else. Please visit coronavirus.gov for more information.
Thank you for virtual family dinners and long-distance birthday wishes. Thank you for sweet streaming melodies and spontaneous dance parties. Thank you for keeping classrooms together and learning alive. Thank you to our incredible network of employees who make all these beautiful connections possible.
Have you heard about social distancing?
This is very serious. We have to stay home.
Not just to protect yourself, but to protect others.
You don't want to spread the coronavirus in your community.
Stay at least 6 feet away from other people. 2, arm's length.
Staying home helps lower the risk for everyone.
Protect your life, protect your loved ones, and protect the world.
Just because you're at home
doesn't mean that we can't be alone together.
Together.
I am Dr. Mollie Marti, and welcome back to Resiliency Matters. We are speaking with Dr. Brenda Eheart, author of Neighbors, the Power of the People Next Door. And Brenda, we were talking about these 5 design patterns. And the fifth one, last but not least, is this transformational or relational leadership. Talk about this characteristic. I'm really interested in what type of person, what type of leader empowers each person to become an active member in contributing to the shared mission in a way that enriches everyone.
I think it takes a very special kind of person. And I think, again, it's something that we really don't think about much because we have been trained in our education, in our different jobs that we've had to be, and when we are the director, when we're the leader, we are the ones that have the knowledge. We are the ones that really have the biggest piece in shaping policy and making program decisions. That's what a leader is. But in fact, we broadly speaking, don't have very much training at all, if any, in how to empower communities to be leaders and to make decisions and have a great deal of input. And so I think we need relational leaders, and it's for some people it's very, very difficult for them to do this, which is to really walk among the people in the community, in the neighborhood, listen to them, give them some hints of ideas or some suggestions, but let them run with it. And then it's just amazing, what people can come up with. One woman who had spent an older person had spent a good part of her youth in foster care. She'd had a pretty rough adulthood as well. But she really was a very creative person. And she decided one day that what we needed was not a maypole, but a birthday pole. And so she created this pole and she put ribbons on it and a happy birthday sign and some balloons. And every day, as part of somebody's volunteer work, they would move that pole and put it in front of a house where there was a birthday that day. And so everybody knew it could be a child, it could have been, a senior, it could have been a parent had a birthday that day. And, 365 days a year, we had that pole moved, but it was just part of bringing that to get that community together, and then people would find out whose birthday it was and they would acknowledge him as they saw him on the street or as they were coming home from school. I mean, that's just one very simple idea. But when you put a whole community of people together with those kinds of ideas, I mean, it's alive. It's just really alive with people doing different things. And in all of that, acknowledging each other and what their real strengths and contributions are, as well as also acknowledging that, we all have our weaknesses and we have our bad days. And that's just part of the ebb and flow of life and of being a human being. But you can have your overall tendency to be to really focus on people's strengths and really acknowledge them for their ideas, regardless of their background, their education, their life experiences. And that's what these relational leaders have to do and bring the community to do.
Yeah, and you say that not only through stories, a lot of wonderful stories in the book that brings this to life, but the different ways and the people you quote, so that if people are curious and want to learn more about relational leadership, again, this book is a great way to do that. And a few more quotes. You say, not only is engagement and its resulting connectedness good for healthy aging, it is necessary to the amelioration of social problems within the community. So you're making this point of these neighbors stepping up and leading. It doesn't mean social services go away or the professionals go away, but they take the lead, and that's where that leadership comes in, is to empower. You refer to this as, quote, the power of shared purpose, shared values, and relational leadership, where the residents themselves become experts in addressing the underlying human suffering caused by isolation and loneliness, and in the role that close, dependable, and daily relationships play in resilience and flourishing. Our professional staff listened to these neighbors, they learned from them, they supported them, all the while recognizing their important role in the work. We know the Ashoka Foundation calls this the citizen sector, right? These talk about just a little bit more that the profound contributions that everyday people can play in the well-being of another.
Well, it can be, we tend to think, and again, if we go to senior engagement, for example, we tend to think about them being tutors in schools or an after school program, or being mentors, doing something specific. And they did a lot of that, at Hope Meadows. But in addition, just being there as well, seeing a couple that had been married for 50 years walking down the street hand in hand. Some of these children had never seen anything like that. They often hadn't even seen couples together. Or seniors, when we would have a lot of traditions such as 4th of July picnic, or an Easter egg hunt or whatever, and people would gather. All of these things stemming from ideas from the community and put together by the community, by the way. But they would see these people bantering back and forth and just really enjoying being with each other. And so just being is also really a very important part of this. And then the children have memories of this, as well as they are benefits of that, because the seniors, will stop and talk, as you just quoted from the book. They'll stop and they'll talk and they'll listen, and as I've said, not only validate each other, but just show that they really care about them, that they're very interested, that those people are worth their time. And then that just, everybody begins doing it. A whole culture of care emerges where it's simply expected.
It really is about the culture of care, and I love the phrase "grand friends," the grand friends, and many call them grandma or grandpa, but right, those grand friends, and also the celebrations. I just want to give that tidbit to our viewers that the book also, you celebrated a lot, right, at Hope Meadows, and the importance of that celebration in attachment, in forming relationships, and for many of these kids in healing, in creating good memories, and a sense of self, and a sense of themselves within this family.
Right. It really helps. It helps everybody have a really strong sense of belonging, and a sense of safety, in the sense that you have a real strong feeling that where you're going to be, and who's going to be with you, and what's going to happen. Like right now, they would know that in a few days there's going to be, we're going to be celebrating Christmas in many of these homes. They begin to take that for granted, and we take it for granted until it's not there. And I give this one very, I don't know if we have time, very poignant story about this little boy who was in foster care with his two siblings, and he was about 5. And on Christmas morning, he got up, and it's both of his brother and sister, all 3 of whom moved to Hope, but at that time they were in another foster home. Brother and sister both had presents from Santa, and he did not. And his foster parent said, Santa doesn't bring presents to bad boys. And he's 5 years old or 6 years old, versus this pretty simple tradition of giving a gift or two to everybody. And we don't think about what that does, or even imagine that somebody would do that, and then what that does to a child. And so hopefully all the memories that he had, partly through all of these traditions that we had, will erase that memory, or at least definitely lessen the negative impact it would have on him for the rest of his life.
Yeah, I've already retold that story, so it did make an impact with me. And I'm going to shift gears a little bit, because Worldmaker has a pandemic parenting program out right now at worldmakerinternational.org/pandemic parenting. And it's one of the pivots we've made to provide support to parents through this pandemic. And I think, so that's one thing. I hope that our parents that are listening are realizing, those celebrations are really important, or making memories, or, let's not just write off, and then we couldn't do anything for the whole pandemic, but creating it through the eyes of those children, your children, That this is a really special and memorable time. And I think that there's a lot that we can learn from the parents you talk about in this book who do foster and adopt. We were talking about kids with tremendous, deep and pervasive trauma.
Exactly.
We don't need to go deeply into that, but I'm just wondering, are there any lessons that you have learned from watching those parents over time that you think might benefit the parents that are listening, that are struggling with things going on through the pandemic as well?
Well, it's very difficult in one sense, as we all know, because we can't be together. And what was at hope was that the people, and the parents especially, were there for each other and had the whole community there for them when they need. And I gave many stories in the books about when the community came together to really help support a parent in a time of need and their children. So that it's really very hard when we can't do that. Having said that, I think that there still are ways to reach out to people for help. Some may still use their, if they're older, they may use their old landline phone, or certainly we can use our cell phones to reach out to people. I think grandparents, the younger grandparents or younger seniors love to cook and make Christmas cookies. That's been really part of a tradition, actually, through all the ages. But if they know somebody that's home and that's just very lonely, baking a batch of cookies and taking over, a plate of cookies to someone, that's at least that's what I've been told many times in our community is very safe, as long as you're wearing masks, or you can just call and say, I'm leaving it outside, and or stand 6 feet away and just talk for a couple minutes. But just finding some ways that are really, really safe to connect. And it takes a little bit of imagination. It also takes for some people, some courage just to reach out. But I think it's really important. And obviously there's Zoom, and they can have Zoom with family or with friends. Those that have computers and can do that. Not everybody can do that. But I think reach out to your faith communities and see how together what you can do given the circumstances of the pandemic to help those that are in need, whatever that need might be, whether that's in terms of parenting, gathering coats. Last night there was a little segment on the news about a woman who with her children was making lasagna and giving it to everybody, and it was just such a welcome, simple thing.
All of those are simple, and yet we know how important they are to overcome isolation. And bottom line, our personal community and global well-being hinge on waking up to the importance of understanding this universal need for caring relationships. Exactly. Thank you for your contribution, Brenda.
Viewers, thank you so much
for joining us on MediaCom MC22, your local programming leader.